Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. This week, we talked to registered dietitian and ulcerative colitis patient Stacey Collins about dietetics and diet research, tests and blood work, surgery, road tripping with IBD, and the best mixer for tequila. Cheers. Welcome to Bowel Moments, everyone. I am your co-host, Alicia Barron. I am what I refer to now as the hanger-on.
You are not a hanger-on. And I am Alicia's co-host, Robin Kingham, IBD patient extraordinaire. And we are super excited to talk to our friend, Stacey. And Stacey, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Stacey Collins. I'm also an IBD patient extraordinaire, and I just finished grad school with my master's in dietetics.
We usually ask everybody what they're drinking, but I know that you literally just walked in the door from work. So what's your favorite drink?
Well, I'm currently drinking water, but my favorite drink is tequila, Topo Chico, and lime juice. If I were drinking, that's what I would be drinking. I've recently gotten into white wine a little bit, but probably tequila would still take the cake.
I just have to point out for people who, if there's anyone listening, anyone at all out there, if you're not familiar with Topo Chico, it is the perfect balance of bubbles to water. It is a sparkling mineral water, a Mexican sparkling mineral water, and it's
so good.
The best. It's the best.
It is the best. Yeah.
Yeah, so. No, I'm a big fan, and unfortunately I'm not in Texas anymore, and so I have to kind of search a little bit for it. So that sounds yummy. I might have to make myself one of those.
Yes, ASAP, get on it.
Yeah, I know. I'll stick with the champagne for now. I decided to do champagne today since I was like, we're celebrating. It's Wednesday.
Yeah, it's Wednesday. We made it through Wednesday almost. So
that's right.
Indeed, yes.
So I'm going to start off with. There's so many things we can talk to you about, Stacey, but I'm going to bring you back.
Okay.
I'm going to bring you back to the beginning. We're going to take it all the way back. So you were diagnosed in college, right?
I was. Yeah.
You want me to go? Tell me how that was. And I was about to say Kevin. Her husband's name is Zach, but I call him Kevin. He knows this. Stacey knows this. It's an agreement between the three of us that he will forever be Kevin to me. When I first met him, I thought his name was Kevin. I called him Kevin all day long. He didn't correct me. And I was like, that's it. You will forever be known as Kevin just because you did not correct me when I called you the wrong name. So, did you meet Zach before you were diagnosed, after you were diagnosed, that whole beginning story part?
Yeah. So I met Zach 2 years, a year and a half before I was diagnosed. Looking back, I think I might have had symptoms as early, even as high school. There's just so many things that you normalize with IBD, and you're like, okay, well, that wasn't pleasant, but you move on, and then you don't really think about it again until it happens again, and you normalize it again, and it's kind of a vicious cycle. But it kind of got to the point where I was in my third year of college, and I couldn't really normalize going to the bathroom 25, 30 times a day and losing blood every single time. I was like, okay, I'm dying. And I really thought it was. And I remember going to UT service, what was it called? It was our campus hospital basically. And they were like, man, you should have not had some sushi or something. And I was like, yeah, this is bad sushi. And then they gave me some antibiotics and some IV fluids. I don't remember a lot from that time because I was so sick. And then I just made an appointment myself with the GI doctor and told them my symptoms. And they were like, can you be here tomorrow? And luckily that worked out. And 21 years old, had a colonoscopy, and they were like, surprise, you have moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. But good news, it's completely treatable. And bad news, you'll have it for the rest of your life. But don't do any research. And of course, my first question was, what can I eat? Because at the time it felt like even water would just go right on through. And my doctor was like, you can eat whatever you want. Food doesn't have any effect on this disease whatsoever. And that's how I became eventually a dietitian.
I have to tell you that I had a very similar experience. I mean, I was 25 when I was diagnosed, but I did the same normalizing thing. I did the stomach flu, food poisoning thing.
Mhm.
I mean, my first doctor told me diet and stress they don't cause and do not affect IBD. Like, this is all same. And mine was 20 years ago. So even as soon as 7 years ago, people are being told the same thing. Okay, sorry.
It's so frustrating. Well, even I guess maybe I should rewind even before that. So I was diagnosed in October, September of 2012. And then that previous March, when I was on spring break with my roommates, we were in LA at Disney and we'd all saved up our money to go on the cheap. And it was such a blast. But I remember being in the bathroom at Disney and I was so sick. And I ended up canceling my trip or cutting it short and going home. And I went to see my primary care doc and told him my symptoms. And he was like, "You're 21, go enjoy college. You probably just have hemorrhoids," which is what I wanted to hear. So
Right.
I didn't fight that. I was like, yeah, I'm 21, I'm fine. And then finally in September, I was like, no, I'm not
Not
fine.
fine.
So
Well, and
Not fine.
hemorrhoids, you probably just have hemorrhoids, but like
he didn't
hemorrhoids
test
don't
for
cause you to go to the bathroom that often. Yes, blood, sure, but like they don't cause you to go more frequently. I mean, that's kind of
I know,
oh
yeah.
Lord.
But you don't know how to even advocate for yourself. At least I didn't at that age because I'd never even had the flu. Like
No.
nothing.
Well, like you said, you don't want to know either. You know, you don't want the answer to be I have a chronic illness. You want to be like, okay, yeah, I can definitely go on spring break again and party it up or, you
For
know,
sure.
just not be home when I don't want to be. So, yeah, I that's hard. I think especially getting diagnosed at that age where, you know, your parents aren't there to be like you have to go do this and no, doctor, you have to pay attention to this when you're that young. I mean, you're on your own. Technically, you're an adult, so you're doing your own thing, but you
Yeah.
know, it's you don't want the answer to be something that is life altering. You want it to be bad sushi.
That's so true. You want it to be bad sushi. And I can look back and have kind of compassion for myself now, but also I was a horrible patient at 21. I remember just like cold turkey quitting steroids and
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
just I did not understand the magnitude of what was happening at all. And once I felt better, I quit going to my infusions. So sad.
But I think
JC now.
I know.
but I also think I mean who wasn't bulletproof when they were that age, number
Right.
one. But also number two, I feel like that's a bit of a failure of our system too. It's like, you know, unfortunately we don't have a lot of time for like a nurse practitioner or a nurse or even your doctor just to sit you down for a good 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour to say here's everything you need to know. Like you cannot do these things. You cannot stop steroids this way. You have like your infusion is doing this thing and that's why you like really explaining it to you because even at 21, if somebody would have said to you, like, Stacey, this is why you're doing these things, you're not self-destructive, you know. Well, okay, at 21, I was a bit self-destructive, but I say with my giant glass of champagne. But I think for the most part, if somebody would have explained to me, like, this is why we're doing this thing, you would have listened, you know, you would have said, oh, okay, I don't want to feel like I ate bad sushi like forever. So
I wish in a perfect world they would have immediately been like, we have an appointment set up for, a 20-minute consult with our social worker.
mhm.
And I wish like he or she would have been able to explain like, this is what your life is going to look like. It's going to be drastically different and it's going to be like this for the rest of your life. Because when I heard treatable for the rest of your life, I was like, I'm fine.
Right. And by that you think, okay, every once in a while when I feel bad,
Mhm.
I take an infusion or I take some steroids. It's like a headache, right? You think, okay, well, it's like a headache. When it gets bad, I'll take something and then it'll be over. Yeah. If somebody would have said, like, this is like, listen, we're going to give you the life course, all this, like your quick and dirty life course, then that could have been good.
Yeah, but I made it.
Everyone needs that. And I say everyone needs it like that because I was diagnosed before the internet was a thing. So I couldn't even go and like Google my symptoms or use AOL or Bing or whatever the search engine was before.
Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves, whatever it was. And if you didn't have a doctor who was promoting, like, here's where you can go get resources, then you had no idea where to find this information. My doctor did have a person living with an ostomy visit me in the hospital before I had my surgery, because at that point we didn't know how long I would have ostomy for. So I did talk to someone who had an ostomy to find out about it, but I did not have any idea of what the past 20 years of my life would be like, 20 years ago.
Oh,
So even it kind of hurts my heart a little bit to hear you say that, that is as soon as 7 years ago, it was still kind of happening that way. And also, I kind of think you have to go to a specialist now or an IBD center of excellence or whatever they're calling themselves to even have access to mental health and, what RD who's actually familiar with IBD and
that's
all of these other, a case manager who actually like holds your hand and walks you through getting all of this approved by your insurance and all of this other stuff that goes along with this.
Let's go back to you're in college, you have the diagnosis. At what point did you sort of say, okay, I got to figure out diet. Diet is my direction.
Okay, so I immediately knew that beer did not make me feel great. And I figured beer's not really a tremendous health benefit. So I think I'll be okay if like omit beer from my college life and just have, oh, what was my go-to then? It was so embarrassing. It was something like beer garitas, it was probably way worse than beer, to be honest. But in my mind, I was like, it's not beer. And so that became kind of my go-to. It was kind of experimenting with horrible well whiskey. And then I knew that red meat physically hurt to digest, like specifically beef. So I really haven't had a proper hamburger since 2012, and I don't regret it. I'm okay. It hurts too bad to even think about it. So I immediately started thinking about nutrition. And then I got a job at Houston Methodist working as a unit secretary. I'd been accepted to nursing school. They were going to pay for it, had it made. And then I met the dietitian at rounds one morning. I worked in bone marrow transplant and she was the transplant dietitian. And I did not even know that was a profession. And she was like, yeah, you can follow me around and watch what I do for a day if you want. And that's when I was like, this is actually what I need to be doing. Because I did not know there were people who would visit patients in the hospital and talk to them about how to optimize your protein, or maybe we can give you a supplement if you're not able to eat because you're on chemo. Because as a patient, I don't know what you have to do to get a dietetic consult. As a GI patient, I had never seen a dietitian in the hospital. Still really burns me up about it. But I was like, well, that needs to change. So I started taking one chemistry class at a time so that I could afford it, and was still taking all my prereqs for dietetics, moved to Oklahoma, got into grad school, which was really a total dream. I didn't imagine that would happen in Oklahoma, like not in my home state, or I don't know. It worked out though. And I got into grad school, went immediately to tell my program director, like, hey, I'm in a flare.
Oh, Lord.
I have an autoimmune disease called, at the time, I might have said Crohn's, because my diagnosis has flipped between Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and indeterminate, and who knows. So at the time, I might have been like, hey, it's Crohn's. Who knows? This is what this looks like. I don't know what my life is going to be like. And she was so kind. And she just said, we'll wing it, which is basically my life motto. And it worked out. But so much of the information that we're taught just doesn't apply to IBD patients. We're taught to try to get people to manage their weight and portion size, and all foods fit is another thing that drives me crazy, because you can talk to any IBD patient and they're like, I assure you, they don't.
No, all foods definitely do not fit.
Yeah. So it's so nuanced. It's so nuanced. And I think that's what I love about nutrition, but I'm rambling. What do you want to know about?
No, I love the fact that all of your fellow students in your classes now have such a better understanding of inflammatory bowel disease, and then are going to go out and share this wealth. Because you're right, unfortunately, like several of the dietitians that, I've talked to, you're right, that is their background, is in how to manage your diabetes, or how to manage, your weight, or again, some of them doing like cancer sort of dietitian to handle, chemo type side effects and things like that. But so, yeah, I mean, I love the fact that all of your fellow students got such a great lesson in how to work with folks with inflammatory bowel disease. And this whole idea of nutrition being a big portion of GI being a new thing is so strange to me. Like,
Oh,
we're talking about a disease of your gastrointestinal system. Where does food go? Like, I just am so mystified that this is still such a wow. We have to, like, we have to figure this out. Of course we do.
of course. Yeah, it's funny. Robin's like, I've been talking about this since before Google, but
Mhm.
literally, yes. In school, like every time we had a presentation, I would talk about inflammatory bowel disease and nutrition therapy every single time. And eventually my program director was like, Stacey, you're gonna have to pick something else for this next one. Because like we get it.
We
um,
need you to learn to do something else too.
yeah, we need another skill too, which is funny. But going into nutrition school, I didn't think I was going to be an IBD dietitian at all, which is just silly. I thought this would be like an aside of my life, but I kept getting angry about how IBD patients were treated. Even in the textbook, I felt like IBD and IBS were used interchangeably so often, and patients will tell you, no, no, one's life threatening and one just sucks so hard. But
Yeah, no shame to IBS. No,
No.
shame.
we're not throwing any shade at you, but you're right.
No.
One is very significantly different, and yeah, IBS sucks, but
Sucks.
one is definitely, yeah, going to be a lot more life altering.
Yeah, and if you want to approach an IBD patient in distress as a healthcare practitioner and you can't seem to get the two acronyms right, that's not going to be an effective way to establish rapport. It's just not. So,
No, because frankly, people living with IBD are some of the most savvy patients. I mean, they really, really are. They're super educated. They are looking at the medical literature. They're calling out when you don't know as much as they do. And to be fair, good. That's what they should be
Yes.
doing. You are the captain of your healthcare team, and that means that sometimes you gotta sometimes play. Make make the calls for the play. I swear to God, I have words that work. It's just not today.
I'm really bad with idioms, so I trust whatever one you make up.
You have to call the place. I still can't
Yes.
get it. Why can't I
Call the
get it?
place.
I'm
You
gonna
have
start
to call the
crying.
place.
Like,
You're right.
words have left me. Crap.
Maybe you should put the champagne down.
Oh,
I kind of want you to expand a little bit on, I know, so diet is really, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's relatively new area of focus for research. And again, that just shocks the shit out of me, for lack of better word. I just can't even, like, how can medical professionals have thought for so many years that the food that we put in our mouths does not affect how we feel? Anywho, stepping off of that soapbox. So how intense is this research? What are they looking at? Are they looking at specific diets? Are they looking at how food actually affects the body? I know there's a whole thing on microbiome. I'm going to shut up and let you answer now.
So I'll try to sound a little bit smart, just to give you a little bit of background on my day. So I'm currently a COVID dietitian, and it's a lot more math than I bargained for. So all of my patients have been ventilated today, and I am a little bit fried. So if anybody listening is like, what is wrong with this robot? I'm trying, y'all, trying. So nutrition research is relatively new, and I have a theory. I don't know if this is true, but I think it's because doctors are taught like in systems. So they're taught gastroenterology and OB-GYN, and they're taught systems instead of how they really connect. And doctors also don't get a lot of nutrition education in their training. If they want nutrition education, they basically have to seek it out on their own. So a lot of patients don't know that, which leaves us to have to kind of fill the gaps, basically. And that's why a lot of patients know a lot more than, like you were just saying, Alicia, that we'll call, medical professionals out if we don't feel like they're up to date on the research, because we have to.
Right.
But to answer your question, Robin, so nutrition as a concept has been around literally since the Greeks. So Hippocrates would say, let food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. But somehow along the way, we forgot all about that and we got a little too conventional. I love the gray area. I think that both can work really well. We can do food with medicine, and we don't have to shame either decision. If people have, the option to choose medicine, that's great. If they have the option to choose food, that's great. If they have the option to do both, more power to you. But nutrition research is pretty new, and we have research on like certain micronutrients, which is usually my favorite thing to read about. So we know like Vitamin D can function as an antioxidant in a lot of scenarios. It can really help encourage patients to be, I'm going to be careful with how I word things, but we know that there's a very strong correlation with very low vitamin D and high incidence of flares. And then we have lots of nutrition education, of course, on money makers like diabetes, obesity. We often in the nutrition field have to like prove where the dietitian would be helpful. And so right now we're working to try to prove like, hey, we have an incredibly high rate of malnutrition with IBD patients. We need GI specific dietitians, which is an up and coming credential. It's in the pipeline.
That's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that I actually have to take vitamin D, and my doctor just doubled my dose based on my labs. So if you have IBD, go get your vitamin D level checked.
Yes, 100%.
Vitamin D is proving to be something that's a problem for a lot of other autoimmune diseases as well. So vitamin D is just a very curious vitamin.
It's super fascinating. Yeah, we've got a long way to go in nutrition research. So what bothers me is it's really difficult to find nutrition research when it comes to like certain medicines. So like, I don't know if a TNF alpha inhibitor like Remicade or Humira is affecting different nutrition related labs. And we don't have a lot of research on stuff like that. Other things like methotrexate, we know that it lowers your folate status. So there's a lot of area for research, but it's exciting.
Well, and it sounds like that's something that could even be layered into clinical trials. So like the companies that are developing these medications potentially should add that in as something that they're monitoring in patients that are in these clinical trials to say, so that they can say, this is how to optimize this medication, you increase, folate, or you do these other things because it helps overall in the overall picture of the patient. So it seems like that's something even, drug companies should be taking note of.
Yeah, 100%. And you asked about specific diets. Are there research on specific diets? There are. Unfortunately, it's really hard to get patients to adhere to. We can't really monitor patient adherence very well with nutrition. Like with drug research, we can say, take this drug. We know they're taking the drug. We can check the trough level of the drug in their blood. And it's just like, hey, pop a pill once a day. With food, it's so much adherence. You have to take food accessibility into account. Schedules, there's so many barriers. So it's really hard to do like controlled trials for nutrition,
right.
Which is a blessing and a curse. But.
For sure. I mean, and that's why in some of these studies that are coming out, they're like delivering food to people to be like, here is your food. But even then, you still have to choose to eat it. And, and frankly, if it comes down to like, I can eat this bland carrot or I could eat this piece of cake, I'm always going to choose the cake, always.
Oh, yeah. And with IBD patients, I think that's harder because sometimes we'll have research like, oh, these are, 12 patients all in remission with no drugs. And it's like, okay, but they don't really represent like all of the patient populations, or these are all IBD patients in a washout period. And again, like that doesn't represent all of the IBD patients. So that's just kind of tricky.
It is for sure. And I mean, one of the things though, I think it's encouraging though, is that I know I was talking to a dietitian in Houston recently, and she was talking about, no, it was Colorado. And she was talking about the person that she had studied with in Boston had developed, I think it was the AID IBD diet.
AIBD, yeah.
That one. Yeah. She had developed it, and it was because she's at an IBD center and she works with IBD patients. And so it's encouraging to hear that dietitians are getting much more integrated into these GI practices and what that means, and about how that diet research is getting pulled into the bigger picture.
Yeah. And I know I'm a little biased, but I think that if you're doing research on nutrition, you need a dietitian on your research forward. I mean, you're limiting your research. Come on, guys.
Did you hear that, researchers? Come on, guys.
Come on, guys. It's also hard because if you come across your run-of-the-mill dietitian in the hospital, they're I always preach this. I'm like, they're generalists. And it's a really weird space for me to be in right now because I'm having to kind of learn a lot of different skills, which I appreciate, but also all I want to do is IBD. Like that is what I want to do. So I'm glad I get to learn about other things, but for the most part, dietitians in the hospital are generalists. And so if you have a very obscure disease, or even if you have inflammatory bowel disease, which is pretty common now, dietitian in the hospital may not know anything about it.
Well, and I do think that the idea of malnourishment and anemia and, these things are, again, even those are new concepts. Like, it was just a couple of years ago that we really figured out that like anemia is such a big thing and what we need to do about it for IBD patients. And that was like,
Oh my gosh,
we
yeah.
just
We
figured
have
that
to make
out.
that checked. Even patients who don't lose blood, we're still at really high risk as patients to have anemia. So you can have completely acquiesced like disease, no disease, whatever. But what am I trying to say? In remission, but you can still have anemia, which is
And I
interesting.
just want to also add, for anemia, you're going to get prescribed pills. And if you can't take pills, you should ask for the infusion. You can ask for the infusion. You have the right to ask for the infusion. And it is so much easier. I'm speaking from personal experience if you can't tell. I could not take the iron pills. They made me horribly sick, even if I ate them with a meal. Asked for the infusion and took a little 2-hour nap, and voila, it was done. And I was not sick stomach for hours.
Woohoo!
Woohoo.
Well, and iron infusions also, like, I feel like they stick around a little bit more. Again, not a healthcare professional, not a doctor, but I've had to have them myself, and like my iron levels stayed higher for a longer period of time. I didn't dip quite so low. It's like they topped me up like a fuel tank, and it was great.
Yeah, which is kind of nice too. They'll check your levels. I'm sure you've experienced, and then they'll be like, "Oh, they're kind of dropping a bit. Let's do, every 2 weeks till we get them where we like them, and then we'll, stop for a bit," which is nice. But yeah, iron infusions have been a lifesaver for me, and I try as a dietitian to really advocate for patients when I see them in the hospital with diseases that affect any part of their GI tract. I'm like, all right, y'all, we got to get these labs like checked, because I know what a B12 deficiency feels like. I know what an iron deficiency feels like. And that's what you're not taught in school. You're taught like, these are the potential consequences, but there's no way to teach what an iron deficiency feels like. It feels like sleeping in your car on your lunch break and wondering why you can't wake up from it like every day,
Yeah.
So
Being past the state of exhaustion.
Yeah.
You're so tired, even when you wake up in the morning. You're so tired, you feel like you haven't slept in 3 days.
yeah, it's like
It's
we don't
like
have
just,
a word for it, really.
yeah, you don't have a word for the amount of exhaustion that you feel.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like the vitamin B12 and what it feels like. So what about like labs in general? I'm asking this question because I just had blood drawn yesterday to check my iron levels because I had an infusion about 4 weeks ago, and the results came back today. And so every time I do this, I have to go and Google what each specific test is to find out like, high, low, what's good, what's not good. I go and check it compared to my labs over the past 3 years, when I started seeing the doctor that I have now. And I don't know why this was such a revelation to me today, because I am not a dumb person and I have lived with this disease for 20 years. But when I first went to see this doctor in 2018, and my labs that we did in October of this year, whenever I found out that I was going to have surgery. So I was in a horrible flare in 2018. And that's why I went to see this new doctor. And then I was really starting to feel bad again. And that's why she did these labs in October and then ended up doing the scope. And they were very similar, very similar. And my labs were even a little bit lower this time than previously. And I saw that my labs, once I started the medication in 2018, the new medication, they got better like 6 months after. And, and then the labs that this last time when I started feeling bad again, like everything was low again. So my iron levels are, with that one infusion, are just slightly at like at the lowest possible point on the range of normal, for most of the stuff. And so they're like, okay, we're just going to keep you there and monitoring you and see what happens, because they wanted to just give me that boost because I was so low. But with labs, I mean, what's realistic? I want to start asking for these every 6 months, especially if I'm not feeling good. Like I can monitor it. It makes me feel like I'm not crazy. Like when my lab work actually shows that something's wrong with me. Because a lot of times my lab work, my doctor will say, "Oh, your labs look great." I'm like,
like check them again.
Sure. Like, here's my arm. Take some more vials. Like, I don't think that can be accurate. So I want to talk about labs specifically for IBD patients. What should we be asking for?
So I will say that we obviously have like normal ranges of things, but for IBD patients, like vitamin D levels, we actually want them a little bit more above normal than normal. But the problem with nutrition research is we have ranges for healthy people. We don't have ranges for people with IBD. So a lot of what we're having to do is educated guesses on optimal levels, if that makes sense.
This makes sense to me now. Thank you.
So yeah, it's really kind of, you know, we love this word, an experiment. You feel a little bit like a lab rat sometimes, but it is what it is. So I guess to answer your question, I think getting labs done twice a year, nutrition related labs, are a really good idea for IBD patients because we're going to go to the doctor anyway. It's not like it's going to force us to make an extra trip.
Right.
We should be asking for B12, folate, especially if you're on methotrexate. Also, if you have like too high of a folate status, it can mask a B12 deficiency, which is really fascinating. Magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin C. I didn't know this until recently, but I was on a call with some dietitians who work at like Cedars-Sinai, and I think it was Cedars-Sinai. I hope I'm not wrong. And they were talking about how they've actually seen scurvy in their IBD patients because of vitamin C deficiencies, which I haven't seen a whole lot of literature on that, but that's like something that they've added to their best practices, which is interesting. Iron panel, I would ask for specifically an iron panel with TIBC. That's the total iron binding capacity, because iron's a sneaky little guy and he can exist in many different forms, and you want to know exactly what it's doing in all of its forms, in its storage form, in its transporting form, what's going on with the iron. Zinc, if you're shitting a lot. Am I allowed to say that word?
Yes.
Okay. You know, the poop word just does not do the IBD experience justice. It just doesn't quite do it for me, but zinc's a good one. Oh, what else? Vitamins A, D, E, and K are like your fat soluble vitamins. So if you're having lots of oily stools, you might want to just kind of check on those. But vitamin D for sure every single time. But those are...
What about something like a calcium level just because of steroid use?
Yeah, so calcium is also kind of tricky. You would have to ask for an ionized calcium in that case, because calcium is stored in the bones. So whenever you're getting a serum calcium, it's not always indicative of how much calcium is stored in your bones. So you can ask for an ionized calcium.
And you should also get a bone density test.
Yes, DEXA would be the gold standard for sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think if a patient's on a steroid, they need to be on a vitamin D supplement, at least, probably calcium as well. There's just so many different labs that you can look at, because depending on where your disease is, that could also affect which micronutrients are being absorbed. And I have a lot of questions, honestly, more than I do answers. Even for like my surgeon, I want to ask, like, how long will it take before I'm able to like metabolize these nutrients again, and where will that happen? And there's a lot that I still want to know. But
good questions to ask. I mean, so you bring up your surgeon. So one of the things that sort of we talked about is that when you were going to school for your master's degree, you weren't terribly well the entire time. So talk a little bit about, number one, like going to school while also not being terribly well. And then two, sort of, you know, that has now led to you facing surgery here not too long from now. So talk kind of two different things. One about going to school while not feeling well, and then also now looking at surgery and making that decision.
So a reminder to patients not to compare your experience to mine, because we are all our own unique beings. We all have our own unique colons, and you don't have to be afraid by hearing my experience, and you don't have to be encouraged. You can just hear it, and your truth can also be your truth. Okay.
Very good point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Remicade worked really well for me for many years. After I got married to Zach and moved to Oklahoma, I was in remission for 6 months. Only symptomatic remission. We were never able to verify if I was in endoscopic remission, whereas, you know, on a scope, you don't have any active disease. So I didn't have any symptoms at all for 6 glorious months. Then I entered a flare in November of 2017, and I'm still hanging out in my flare. It's been varying degrees of ebbs and flows, but my program started in August of 2018. So I was in an active flare when my program started. And I was working trauma, which was in itself probably triggering for a lot of stress. But I remember having to like run to the like sprint down the hall to the bathroom in the OR. And then like while all this was happening, giving my 2 weeks notice, starting grad school. And that's whenever I just told my program director, like, hey, just so you know, I'm not trying to be rude and leave class. I just have to because I might shit in your class. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I told her. And luckily she handled it like a champ. And in October, my first semester, so I made it a whole, 2 months before my first hospitalization. And I was like, well, shoot. And I just changed doctors to a doctor in Dallas who was wonderful. They were a little bit limited by what they're able to do. So like they were still an IBD disease center of excellence, but there was a lot of the fail firsts. You have to, the step therapy thing. We have to prove to insurance that you're failing Remicade. We have to fail to prove to insurance. And I was like, I'm pretty sure, guys. So that was a real struggle. Then I started Entyvio. Nope, that's a lie. I started Xeljanz next. Had about 16 weeks where I thought it was working, and then all of a sudden it plummeted. Had another hospitalization for that. With every hospitalization, I just told my teachers, like, look, this is what's going on. They were pretty aware anyway because I was having to record lectures on my computer so that I would sprint to the bathroom, come back to class, and then after class I would have to like retake all my notes that I had recorded on my computer. Or if I wasn't able to record on my computer because of like a professor's rule, sometimes professors didn't like that, I would just get my notes from my really sweet classmates. And that was hard. But I would like to say my first semester I was on the dean's list while in the hospital, I'm really proud of myself for that because I'm not.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
Thanks, guys. I'm a smart cookie. I'm not the smartest, so I'm real proud of my Dean's List award, my one Dean's List award. So then I went on to have, I think, 2 other hospitalizations. So I think I had a total of 3 hospitalizations in the 2 years that I was in grad school. It was horrible.
So hospitalized basically every semester.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and I was failing drugs every semester, starting steroids every semester. As soon as I would end the taper of the steroids, I felt like I was in the hospital all over again. I don't remember a whole lot from grad school, honestly. Like, I'm a little concerned about how much I've retained, but, we can learn on the fly. It's fine.
You retained a lot of information. Don't even try and pretend like you didn't, ma'am.
Well, you know what I mean? When you're in a flare, you're like, looking back, you don't remember any of it.
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah. When you're looking back from the bird's eye view, you're like, those past 2 years were a blur. But I can say from personal experience and conversations with you and this conversation that you retained a lot of information and you are a smart cookie.
Thank you. Yeah, grad school is not a great, fun time for me. I didn't go to brunch with friends. I didn't go drink with friends. I didn't go to dinner with friends. All I did was study in my bathroom and watch Gilmore Girls whenever I needed a good feel-good moment and live in the hospital. I felt like that was all grad school was for me. So not great times. I failed a lot of drugs, all of them actually in grad school.
And is that's where we are now? You failed all of the drugs. And so now.
Yeah. So we failed all the drugs. Stelara gave me some relief for a while. Eventually moved my care to Houston because it was geographically where we want to be in the long run and yada, yada. So do not regret that decision because I felt like they had so many resources at the doctor that I'm at. And so they don't really wait around for like the fail first thing. They're like, well, we have like a research bank and guess what? We're going to code you as research and you're going to get your drugs without a delay. And like, we'll make it work basically. And that's, I think, saved my life, honestly. And I will actually start crying if I talk too much about that. But I started Stelara. I had a few good months. Then my husband, Zach, and I took our first vacation since getting married in 2017 as a celebration of me finishing my master's degree. We went on a little road trip and like primitive camped, did not see human beings for like 10 days this summer.
That sounds lovely, not seeing any human beings for 10 days.
Honestly, 2020, like having been separated from humans, I kind of am tired of them though. I'm like, I don't know how it is that we've been separated from human beings, but I'm kind of tired of y'all. Anyway.
Yeah, at times I get overwhelmed with social stuff now where I'm
Yes.
like, I don't actually want to talk to you
I
anymore.
don't want to talk to
And I
you.
worked from home before, so I don't know if this is I'm only just marinating in it over here. Eventually I'll just be a hermit. Anyway, going back to you.
Oh, well, we went on, it was another reason why we planned the trip is because I was doing so well toward the tail end of my dietetic internship. I didn't have really any symptoms, but all of a sudden they came back, and it was the week that we were going to go on our trip. And I mean, they came back like I'm sick probably 19 times a day, like all of a sudden. And it wasn't a slow, it was just all of a sudden, it just blows my mind. So the whole time we're on the road, I'm not really like eating or drinking the whole time we're on the road, and we're like road tripping from Texas to Montana. Like that's a long time to not, yeah. The dietitian, Stacey, doesn't like that, but it is what it is. Like we went camping in Grand Teton, outside of Grand Teton. I shit all over Grand Teton, all over it. We did not leave Grand Teton better than we found it. And I think what ultimately led me to pursue surgery was I was hospitalized a couple weeks after that trip. My doctor told me, like, you have two options. We try one more drug or you get surgery, or both, because that's kind of where we're headed. So it was a really difficult decision, but what ultimately led me to that decision was, and Zach is honestly like the most supportive human. He's, I don't know how he does it. I think he's got like some sort of superpower to be able to handle me in a flare, and I don't know how he does it. But we woke up one morning and he doesn't really remember dreams, and he's like, I had a dream that we went to Park City, Utah. We were gonna go skiing, but you were too sick, and we decided to just walk around the city instead. And it's okay because we just walked around and we still had the very best time. And I realized that that's what I've been doing for 8 years. I've been compromising. I haven't gone to brunch with my friends in grad school. I missed out on partying with my friends that I'm never going to get to do that again with. I mean, that was in Oklahoma. I'm in Texas now. We're grown-ups. So I'm excited to have finally arrived in this place that I'm at, though, because I think I've been compromising on my quality of life without realizing it.
I feel like I hear this a lot from people living with these diseases. You made me cry.
Me too. I'm crying too.
We're all going to take a moment.
I'm sorry. It's a very lighthearted podcast, guys. Cheers.
Clearly it's not. We're not doing such a good job of it. No, I mean, I hear that a lot from people living with IBD who have had surgery, that they put it off because it felt like such a finality, or felt like such a big, big, big thing. And then once they had it, they felt so much better that they were like, why the heck didn't I do this before? So I sincerely hope that's your case as well. But I do feel like there are a lot of people that are like you, where they're like, I'm just going to keep trying and trying and trying. And perhaps at some point, having the conversation about surgery maybe could have happened sooner, or maybe having somebody who come in who has had surgery to be like, hey, like, I get it. I was you. Like, here was my experience, and I'm not trying to sway you one way or another. It's just that, like, here's to put this on the table as something that seems like a really drastic thing, but doesn't have to be.
I feel like Rob said these exact words to me.
I am a big, in case I haven't said this yet, I am a big fan of surgery as a treatment option and not a last resort. I'm a huge fan of surgery as a treatment option and not a last resort. When you wait to have surgery as a last resort,
you're so much sicker. And it becomes much bigger of a deal.
So much sicker, so much sicker. And you have so many fewer options of what the outcome of that surgery is going to be.
Yeah.
Could you have just had a resection instead of a complete colectomy? Could you have just, I mean, surgery is serious. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like saying, hey, let's go get surgery every other day. That's not what I'm saying.
Pull out our colons. Come on.
Yeah, let's like just chop up your colon. That's not what I'm trying to say. No. But if you are that sick, if your body is that unwell early on, then surgery needs to be on the table at some point. When they've looked at a scope and medicines are failing, like, I don't know, after the first medicine, I don't know, after the second medicine, I don't know what that magic number is, but if a medicine fails, like, I would recommend to people say, hey, like, what does that mean? Is surgery on the table? Should you talk to your doctor about that? Should you bring in a surgeon just to find out what that looks like for you? I'm not saying that that's the exact right answer, but Also, the longer that your colon is inflamed like that, the higher your chances of colon cancer.
Yes.
The higher your chances of colon cancer. And this is a okay, I'm starting to preach now. Sorry. Somebody give me an amen.
Preach.
So this is a lifelong chronic illness. Your colon and intestines and esophagus and a stomach will go through phases of inflammation and non-inflammation. And every time it's inflamed, it increases your chances of cancer. And I was on the American Cancer Society's website today, and I probably shouldn't have been because of where I am mentally, but here we are, because that's where I am.
Do I need to take your computer away from you?
Maybe, because I always tell other people, put your hands up and step away from Google. But here I am. So I just want to put this out there to everyone. Colon cancer is lethal.
Lethal, yeah.
Colon cancer is lethal. And I saw an education webinar recently where a surgeon was talking about reasons to have surgery. A colon and rectal surgeon was talking about reasons to have surgery. And for Crohn's disease, it was emergency surgery. And like, these are the reasons why you would have emergency surgery with Crohn's disease. And these are reasons why you would have surgery. It's not emergent. And high-grade dysplasia / cancer was a reason to have emergency surgery for Crohn's disease. And that's where I am. I mean, I'm in a different place for you, but that's where I am. So I feel like, would I be in a different place if 20 years ago I had different treatment options and wasn't inflamed as I don't know the answer to that, but I feel like people need to know that surgery is not as scary as they think it is, and that it is a treatment option and not just the last resort.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm so glad.
Steps off soapbox.
No, I'm so glad you said that, because all my friends who've had surgery, by the way, like, I'm constantly texting Robin and 2 other friends, Caroline and Bethany, and they're always like, I wish I would have done it sooner. My life is so much easier. And they're like, even, don't get me wrong, there's hard, painful days. But IBD patients, like, we can handle some tough shit. But my quality of life, like, I can go to a drive-through and I don't have to be in constant terror about what's about to happen to my body. And, just like little life things like that I think a lot of people take for granted that I don't.
And frankly, I mean, just from the dietitian standpoint, so taking, like, you as patient and dietitian, like, if your colon is inflamed for a very, very, very long time, you're also not taking in the same nutrients and hydration and all of these things. And so at some point you become more malnourished. The longer it goes, the less you are able to cope with said surgery in a way that you potentially could have had you made that call a little earlier. And again, like, we're not big colorectal surgeon, lobby over here. Like, we're not saying everybody run out and talk to a surgeon today, but having that conversation when potentially treatments start to fail and you're not responding, bringing that up with your doctor and saying, is surgery an option for me? Is it, resecting? Is it this? Is it that? Like, is surgery an option for me? And what does that mean? And what would that look like? And sort of introducing that topic, if your doctor isn't, as a treatment option, I think is very valid and potentially wise, I say, as a non-healthcare professional and non-patient.
Right.
I think that you make such a good point. I was on a call recently talking to other GI dietitians, and one of the educations that I attended was perioperative ulcerative colitis, Crohn's nutrition. And it was all about how we need to integrate nutrition in Crohn's and ulcerative colitis perioperatively. So we need to get patients well enough to have surgery. And so at what point do we start having the surgery conversation? Whereas, like, also what can we do emergently to get patients as well as possible, basically. But I really appreciated that, because I think so long I've purposefully separated, like, I don't want to know about surgery because that might be my reality. And she was not a patient, but obviously a very well-read, very, like, thorough, well-trained, strong healthcare professional. And she was like, no, this is a treatment option. This is not the option. This is an option, and patients need to know how to take care of themselves so they're not in the dark. And I was like, man.
Is that when you texted me and told me that supplementing with a shake 2 weeks prior to surgery, I bought them. I bought the shakes. I'm starting them 2 weeks prior to surgery and continuing them 2 weeks after surgery to increase. I want to read the text now. What did you say?
Basically, they were just talking about, like, perioperative nutrition and how supplementing with we call it enteral formula. So it's just it's just nutrition, pharmaceutical grade nutrition formula, can help like lessen your chances of complications.
Yes, that's what you sent me in the text. And I was like,
Interesting.
going online to buy pharmacy grade enteral nutrition shakes.
Yeah. We
It
actually
makes
like
sense.
give
It makes sense if you go into surgery more healthy, more hydrated, more, nutritionized, you're gonna come out better. I mean, that just, again, like this stuff makes sense. Like,
I know.
why
You're
is
like,
this novel?
what is this novel? Yeah.
I feel like Phoebe on Friends. This is brand new information.
Which it shouldn't be, but
Which it shouldn't be.
Yeah, but here we are. And that's the thing that really drove me to want to do nutrition, I think, because as a patient, I was like, man, I'm in the dark. And I was reaching out to dietitians who had no knowledge in IBD and put me on elimination diets that actually compromise my nutritional status. Because patients are not supported the way that they deserve to be supported. And so that's initially why I was like, well, or maybe eventually why I was like, okay, I have to learn how to be an IBD dietitian because this is a need.
Right. And this is why I sent Stacey a text last year in October when I really started feeling bad again. And so that was a year ago. Oh my gosh. A year ago in October, sending Stacey a text saying, okay, food, I have no control over how I'm feeling. I only have control over the food I'm eating. I know you're still a student, but this is what I'm doing. What do you think? And she responds like, I'm gonna need you to add some protein to that. And
no, because at the time I think you're like, I'm eating bananas.
And rice and white rice. I was eating bananas and white rice at that point. Yes.
Which as a patient,
I think you added an avocado. I think that's as far as you got though.
I did add avocado, and I had to eat just the bananas and rice for a little while before I added the avocado. And Stacey was like, I'm gonna need you to add some protein.
Yeah. Also, we have research that we know that in a flare, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis patients, we have higher calorie and protein needs in a flare than we do in remission. So not only are we not meeting our normal protein and calorie needs, we're not eating our increased protein and calorie needs whenever we're in a flare because we're either afraid of food or we're just tired and we're going to bed.
Well, and frankly, again, it goes back to if you're inflamed, you're not intaking the same nutrients from the food that you're eating. And so, of course, if you and I eat the same thing, I'm taking in significantly more nutrients from that than you are. And so it just makes sense that you're going to have to eat more.
Yes.
But like you said, food is scary or food is 7 trips to the bathroom, so you're retaining, you're saying, I'm not going to eat because I want to go out with my friends, or I'm going to try to have this quality of life. But meanwhile, that means you're not taking in that extra that you need in order to stay healthy. And again, the longer that goes on, the less healthy you are, the less able to cope you are. And so it's just, it's a weird vicious cycle that, like either you're staying home and you're doing what you need to do and you're going to the bathroom 20 times, or you're compromising, you're not eating an entire road trip until you're hospitalized at the end because you're not taking in everything you need. It's just, there's a lot of not good answers, I think, happening. But we're working on it. We're working on it.
You guys are doing the Lord's work here with your podcast.
Drinking and talking? Yes. Lord's work. Practically a nun over here.
Practically none. Yes.
Very good. Well, Stacey, thank you so much. This was super interesting. And it's so nice to talk to somebody who has sort of these dual perspectives. And I anticipate we're going to see a lot more of this. I mean, it's interesting to talk to people affected by these diseases, especially people younger, like who have these diseases that are deliberately choosing to have careers that are, going to help people with these diseases, either becoming doctors or nurses or dietitians. And so I'm really enthusiastic about 5 years from now, we're going to have this whole crop of people that are like, bitches represent, like you guys are going to get it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really hopeful about the future of being a patient with IBD. I think I thought my life was doomed for a hot second. Flares will lie to you and make you think that way sometimes. And I got just so mad. I was like, this can't be it, y'all. We got to do better. We got to do better. And that kind of is just what keeps me crazy and keeps me going. So
yeah. I'm seeing the shift. I definitely am seeing the shift.
Yeah,
thank you. That's really encouraging to hear. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you for having me. You are the best.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.